The fire in the great hearth had burned low, its light barely reaching the far corners of the hall. I sat in the high-backed chair that had belonged to my father and his father before him, staring into the dying flames. The stone walls around me held generations of wealth, granaries that never emptied, forges that rang from dawn until dusk, docks where ships from distant ports unloaded their cargo. People in the town spoke of me with respect, sometimes with envy. They said I had everything a man could want. They were wrong. The hall was silent except for the occasional crack of a log. No footsteps echoed from the corridors. No voice called my name from another room. For years I had told myself this was the price of the life I had built. I had chosen it after all. After she was gone, I had buried myself in ledgers and contracts and the endless demands of the land. It was easier that way. Easier than opening the doors of this cold place to anyone who might one day leave again. Winter had come early this year. The wind pressed against the shutters like it wanted to get inside. I reached for the stack of papers the priests had sent from the temple that afternoon. The usual list of families who needed help before the snow grew too deep. Every year I sent coin and supplies through them, firewood, warm cloaks, bread, and salted meat. I never went myself. I had learned that charity given with a face attached often shamed the people it was meant to help. I sorted through the pages slowly, making notes in the margin with a quill that scratched too loudly in the quiet. Most of the requests were familiar: widows with small children, old men whose hands could no longer split wood, a family whose roof had collapsed under the first heavy snow. I approved them all without thinking. Then I found the letter. It was folded small, the paper cheap and slightly torn at one corner, as if it had been written in haste or by a hand not used to holding a pen. It had been tucked between two larger sheets, almost hidden. I almost set it aside with the others, but something about the careful way it was folded made me open it. The handwriting was uneven, the letters large and round. Kin gui dan mua jong, shin hai gui cho chao mot ngoi cha, me chao lam viek rat vatva. Joy ki me coach ki tuong chao janangu. Chao kong kan kwa. Chao chi mon ko I jo gyup me chao koi lai. Luma. I read it once. Then I read it again, slower this time. The words did not change. There was no request for toys or sweets or new clothes, no plea for herself at all. Only a child asking for someone to make her mother stop crying when she thought no one could hear. I set the letter down on the table, my hand stayed on it, fingers resting over the name at the bottom as if I could feel the weight of it through the paper. For a long time, I did not move. The fire popped and settled. Outside, the wind moaned around the tower. Inside, the hall seemed even larger and emptier than before. I had spent years making sure no one could reach the part of me that still remembered what it felt like to lose someone. I had built walls thicker than the stone around this castle. Yet a few crooked lines written by a child I had never met had slipped through a crack I did not know existed. I picked up the letter again and read it a third time. The name at the bottom was written with extra care, each letter pressed into the paper as if the writer had wanted to make sure it could not be mistaken for anyone else. Luma. I did not know her. I did not know her mother. I did not know why the simple words on this page made my chest feel tight in a way ledgers and contracts never had. But I knew I would not be able to put the letter away and forget it. Not tonight. I folded it carefully, the way it had been folded before, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. The fire had almost gone out. I did not add another log. I sat in the growing dark and listened to the wind, the letter a small, warm weight against my chest. For the first time in a very long time, the silence in the hall did not feel like something I had chosen. It felt like something that had been waiting for me to notice how deep it had become. The letter stayed in my coat pocket through the night. I did not sleep. When the first gray light touched the high windows, I rose and crossed the cold floor to the bell pull. Brennan appeared within minutes, as he always did. He had served my family since before I was born, and he knew when not to ask questions. Find out what you can about a woman named Myreth Oakfang and her daughter, I told him. They live near the edge of town. The mother works at the Red Coal Kitchen. I want to know how they are managing this winter. Brennan did not show surprise. He never did. He only nodded once and left. I spent the morning in the study, pretending to review contracts while my hand kept returning to the folded paper inside my coat. The words were simple, almost childish, yet they had settled somewhere deep and would not move. I had helped many families over the years. None of them had ever asked for something so small and so impossible to buy. Brennan returned in the afternoon with the information I had requested. Mireth Oakfang was a widow. Her husband had left when the child was still small. She worked long hours at the tavern, washing dishes and mending clothes for extra coin. The rent on their small house was already 2 months late. The girl, Luma, still attended the temple school every day, though her cloak was thin and patched. Neighbors said the mother tried to keep the house warm with whatever scraps of wood she could gather. Sometimes there was not enough. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I gave him new instructions. Send word to the temple. The winter fund will cover 3 months of their rent, plus firewood, winter cloaks for both of them, flour, and salted meat. Make it clear this comes from the fund, nothing more. No names, no visits from anyone wearing my colors. Brennan hesitated for the first time. My lord, if I may ask— You may not, I said, though my voice was not harsh. Just see it done. He bowed and left. I did not go to see the delivery myself. I had learned long ago that when help arrives, wearing a face people recognize, it often costs the receiver more than the giver intends. I stayed in the castle and waited for the report that the supplies had reached them. 2 days later, Brennan brought word that the woman had cried when the temple priest explained the aid was meant for her. She had asked repeatedly if there had been a mistake, if someone else needed it more. Only after the priest insisted did she accept. The girl had helped carry the firewood inside with both arms, though it was almost too heavy for her. I kept the letter in my pocket. Sometimes when the hall grew too quiet, I took it out and read it again. The same lines, the same careful handwriting. Each time I felt the same strange ache, as if the words had found a place inside me that had been empty for years and were slowly filling it with something I could not name. A month passed. The snow grew deeper. The temple prepared its annual winter festival for the poorer children of the town. Simple games, hot soup, small gifts of mittens and scarves. I had funded it every year but had never attended. This time I told Brennan I would go, but I would go without any sign of who I was. A plain brown cloak, no crest, no guards, just another man among the crowd. The festival was held in the open square beside the temple. Lanterns hung from the bare branches of the old oak trees. Children ran between tables, their laughter sharp in the cold air. I stood near the back, hands in my pockets, watching. I saw her first. The girl was smaller than I had imagined. 8 years old, the letter had said. She wore the new cloak that had come from the fund. It was still a little too long, but she held herself straight as she helped carry bowls of soup to the smaller children. Her skin was a soft green, her black hair tied back with a strip of cloth. When she smiled at something another child said, the smile reached her eyes completely. Beside her stood her mother. Mireth Oakfang was taller than most human women, her frame strong from years of work. Her face looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not easily cure, but there was a gentleness in the way she watched her daughter. She wore the new cloak as well. Once when Luma ran back to her, Mireth bent down and brushed snow from the girl's hair with careful fingers. For a moment her mouth curved upward. It was not a large smile, but it was real. I stayed where I was, half hidden by the crowd. Near the end of the afternoon, the priest asked if any of the children wanted to say a few words of thanks. Luma stepped forward without hesitation. She stood on a small wooden crate so the adults could see her. Her voice was clear and steady. I do not know who sent the firewood and the warm clothes, she said, but my mother smiled this morning. She has not smiled like that for a long time, so thank you, whoever you are. It made her happy. The crowd clapped. Luma stepped down and ran back to her mother. Mireth pulled her close, and for a moment the two of them stood together while the snow fell around them. I turned away before anyone could see my face clearly. The cold air stung my eyes, but it was not only the wind. I walked back to the castle through the darkening streets. The letter was still in my pocket. I had come to the festival only to see them once, to make sure the help had reached the right place. I had not expected the sound of a child's voice to settle so heavily inside my chest. That night I sat by the fire again. The hall was the same. The silence was the same. But something had shifted, small and stubborn like a crack that had begun to open in stone that had been solid for a very long time. I did not know what I was becoming to them or what they were becoming to me. I only knew that the words on that cheap piece of paper had not finished with me yet. The snow had not stopped falling since the festival. 2 days later I found myself walking through the market square on an errand I could have sent Brennan to handle. I told myself it was only to clear my head. The truth was simpler. I wanted to see if the cloaks had kept them warm. I did not expect to meet them so soon. I had stopped at a stall selling winter apples when I heard quick footsteps behind me. A small shape darted past, chasing a bright red apple that had rolled away from a tipped basket. The child skidded on the icy stones and would have fallen if I had not caught her arm. She looked up at me with wide eyes, green skin, black hair escaping from a simple tie, and a face that still carried the roundness of youth. Luma. "I am sorry, sir," she said at once. Remembering her manners even while out of breath, she straightened and gave a small, careful bow. "I was not looking where I was going." I released her arm slowly. "No harm done. Are you all right?" She nodded, then noticed the apple still in my hand. I held it out to her. She took it with both hands as if it were something fragile. "Thank you," she said. Then, after a moment of thought, she added, "My name is Luma Oakfang. My mother says I must always say my name clearly so people remember." The name settled in my chest exactly where the letter had been resting for weeks. Before I could answer, a taller figure appeared through the crowd. Mareth moved quickly, her new cloak already dusted with snow. She stopped when she saw her daughter standing with a stranger. "Luma," she said, voice calm but edged with worry. Then she looked at me. "I hope she did not trouble you." "She did not," I answered. "She was only chasing what escaped her." Mareth studied my face for a moment longer than politeness required. She saw nothing that marked me as the lord of the region, only a man in a plain wool cloak, older than her but not yet old, standing in the middle of the market like anyone else. "I am Dorian," I said. It was not a lie, only an incomplete truth. "I help with the winter fund sometimes." She inclined her head. "Then I owe you thanks for the firewood and the cloaks. They came at the right time." "You owe the temple," I replied. "Not me." Luma was still holding the apple. She looked between us, then spoke without hesitation. "Mother, this is the man who caught me. He is very fast for someone so tall." A small sound escaped Mareth that might have been the beginning of a smile. She caught it before it could grow. "Come, Luma. We still have errands." The girl glanced at me once more before following her mother. I watched them disappear into the crowd and felt something shift inside me, small but definite. After that day, I stopped pretending I was only passing through their part of town. I began appearing at the temple when bread was distributed to the poorest families. I carried baskets and stacked wood without drawing attention to myself. Luma noticed me first. She would wave and run over to show me a drawing she had made at school or a new word she had learned. I listened. I asked questions. She answered with the serious concentration of a child who had decided someone was worth talking to. One afternoon, I brought extra paper and charcoal to the temple school. The teacher accepted the gift without asking who had paid for it. Luma found me afterward and showed me the first page she had filled. Careful letters and a drawing of a house with smoke coming from the chimney. Later that week, I ate at the Red Coal Kitchen for the first time. The stew was thin, but hot. Mareth was working in the back, but she saw me when she carried out a tray. She did not speak to me that day, only nodded once in acknowledgement. Luma, however, had no such restraint. She appeared at my table with a wooden kite that had lost its tail. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "The wind took it yesterday, and now it will not fly." I had never repaired a kite in my life. "I can try," I told her. That night I sat in the castle study with the broken kite on the table and a book on simple woodworking open beside it. Brennan raised an eyebrow when he brought tea but said nothing. By morning, the kite had a new tail made of strips of old cloth and a sturdier crossbar. I brought it to the market square the next day. Luma tested it on the open ground near the temple and laughed when it caught the wind and climbed. Mareth watched from the doorway of the tavern. She did not come closer, but she did not turn away either. A week later, she found me alone behind the temple after I had helped stack the last of the winter wood. She carried 2 cups of hot tea and set one on the low stone wall between us. "You have been coming here often," she said. "I have time," I answered. She was quiet for a moment. Steam rose between us. "Luma likes you. She talks about you at home. She says you listen when she speaks." "I do." Mareth looked at me directly then. Her eyes were tired but clear. "I am grateful for what the fund has given us. But I do not want my daughter to learn that the way to survive is to wait for strangers to be kind. I have seen what that does to children." I met her gaze. Then I will not be a stranger who saves you. I will only be nearby when 2 pairs of hands are better than 1. She studied me for a long time. Finally, she picked up her cup and drank. We will see, she said. The day the school held its winter recitation, Luma came to find me at the temple steps. She stood very straight and spoke quickly, as if she had practiced the words. Tomorrow is the day parents come to listen. My mother has to work at the tavern. She cannot ask for time off. I do not have a father to bring. Will you come and watch me read my poem? I did not answer at once. The request was small and enormous at the same time. Yes, I said, I will come. The schoolyard was crowded with mothers and a few fathers. I stood at the back in my plain cloak. When Luma's name was called, she walked to the front with her paper held in both hands. Her voice was steady as she read about snow that covered the fields, and how even the smallest lights could be seen from far away when the world turned white. When she finished, the yard clapped. Luma looked across the children and found me. She ran straight through the crowd and threw her arms around my waist before I could step back. I felt the small weight of her against me and the sudden tightness in my throat. From the edge of the yard, Mireth stood watching. She had come after all, even though she could not stay long. Her eyes were bright with something she did not let fall. She did not come closer, but she did not look away. That evening, when I returned to the castle, the halls felt less empty than they had in years. I still had not told them who I truly was. The lie sat between us like a third person at the table. But for the first time, I wondered whether the truth, when it finally came, would break what we were slowly building, or whether it might be the only thing strong enough to hold it together. I had promised Luma I would show her the castle library. She had spoken about it for days, her eyes bright whenever she mentioned the idea of shelves that reached the ceiling. I told myself it was only a small kindness, nothing that would change what we were becoming. I was wrong. She came on a clear afternoon when the snow had finally stopped. I met her at the side gate so no one would see a child walking alone toward the great doors. She wore the cloak I had sent through the temple and carried a small cloth bag with 2 books she wanted to return. Brennan saw us in the corridor but said nothing, only inclined his head and stepped aside. The library was warmer than the rest of the castle. Tall windows let in pale winter light, and the smell of old paper and leather filled the air. Luma stood very still for a moment, looking up at the rows of books with her mouth slightly open. You can touch them, I told her. Just be careful with the older ones. She nodded and began to wander between the shelves, running her fingers lightly along the spines. I moved to one of the lower cases where picture books were kept and began pulling out volumes I thought she might like. My back was turned for only a few minutes. When I looked around, she was standing at my writing desk near the window. The top drawer was open. In her hands was a folded piece of cheap paper that I had kept there since the night I first read it. She looked at me. Her voice was small but steady. Mr. Dorian, why do you have my letter to the winter god? The room became very quiet. I could hear the fire crackling in the hearth and the distant sound of wind against the shutters. I set the books I was holding down on the nearest table and walked to her. I knelt so that we were at the same height. There was no point in lying anymore, not to her. The letter was sent to the temple, I said. It was mixed in with the other requests that came to me. I read it by accident. Luma looked down at the paper in her hands. She traced her own name at the bottom with one finger. You sent the firewood, she said. It was not a question. And the cloaks, and the money for the rent. Yes. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was even smaller. So, the winter god never got it. I felt something sharp move through my chest. Perhaps the winter god sent it to someone who could actually help. Luma folded the letter again, very carefully, the way she must have folded it the first time. She placed it back in the drawer and closed it. Then she looked at me with eyes that were too old for her face. You should have told us, she said. I know. She did not cry. She only nodded once, as if she had decided something, and walked to the door. I followed her out of the library and down the long corridor. She did not speak again until we reached the side gate. I have to go home now, she said. Mother will be worried. I watched her walk away down the path that led toward the edge of town. The snow crunched under her boots. She did not look back. That evening, just after the lamps were lit, Mireth arrived at the castle. Brennan came to find me in the study. His expression was carefully neutral. The woman from the Red Coal Kitchen, is here, my lord. She says she needs to speak with you." I told him to bring her to the small receiving room. When I entered, Mireth was standing near the fire, still wearing her work apron beneath the winter cloak. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. She looked at me the way a person looks at something they have only just recognized. "You are Lord Dorian Ashvale," she said. It was not a question. I did not try to deny it. "I am." She was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke, her voice was low and controlled, but I could hear the hurt underneath it. "All this time you came to the temple, to the school, to the tavern. You let my daughter grow attached to you. You let me begin to trust you. And you hid who you were because you thought we would not accept your help if we knew the truth." "I was afraid," I said. "At first, I thought you would refuse the aid if you knew it came from me. Later, I was afraid that if you knew, you would not let me see Luma again." Mireth's mouth tightened. "So, you chose to lie instead." "I chose to keep helping without making either of you feel like you owed me something." She looked away toward the fire. The light moved across her face and made the tiredness in her eyes more visible. "Luma told me everything," she said. "She said you knelt and told her the truth when she found the letter. She said you did not try to make excuses." "I did not." Mireth turned back to me. "I am grateful for what you have done for us. The firewood, the cloaks, the rent, they mattered. But gratitude is not the same as trust. Trust needs more than good deeds. It needs the truth from the beginning." I had no answer that would make the words less true. She took a slow breath. "Luma is waiting outside. I told her I would come in alone. She thinks you are a good man. She is not wrong. But I will not let her learn that the people we care about are allowed to keep important truths from us." Mireth walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Do not send more gifts in secret," she said. "If you wish to help, do it openly. And do not come to the school or the tavern unless you are willing to be seen for who you are." She opened the door. Luma was standing in the corridor, her small face pale. When she saw her mother, she ran forward and took her hand. Mireth looked down at her, then back at me one last time. "We are going home," she said. They left together. I stood in the receiving room long after the sound of their footsteps had faded. The fire burned steadily, but the room felt colder than it had before they arrived. In the days that followed, Luma did not come to the temple. Mireth did not appear at the market when I passed through. I did not go looking for them. I continued the work of the Winter Fund, but I made sure every delivery was recorded with clear names and clear reasons. No more hidden envelopes, no more quiet arrangements. I understood what Mireth had told me. If I wanted to remain in their lives, I could not buy my way in with gold or with kindness that came without a face. I could only wait and hope that when the truth had settled, they might choose to let me return. Not because I was the Lord of Northmere, but because I had finally stopped pretending to be anyone else. I stopped sending anything in secret. Instead, I opened the northern granary to the families who lived at the edge of town. I had the old storehouses cleaned and stocked with firewood that anyone could take without asking permission. I asked the temple to begin a small school where human and orc children could learn together, and I paid the teachers from my own account so no parent would have to choose between work and lessons. I also created a modest fund that paid fair wages to widows who took in mending or helped in the kitchens, money that did not require anyone to come begging first. These were not gifts for Mireth and Luma alone. I made sure the announcements were posted openly and that the temple recorded every distribution. If Mireth heard about them, she would know they were not another attempt to buy her trust. Winter began to loosen its grip. The roads grew muddy instead of frozen, and the first thin spears of green appeared along the edges of the fields. I continued my work at the castle and at the temple, but I did not seek them out. I had learned that some distances can only be crossed by the person who placed them there. One evening, when the last snow was melting from the courtyard, Brennan came to the study. "The woman from the Red Coal Kitchen is here again, my lord." She came alone. I set down the ledger I had been pretending to read. "Bring her to the small hall." Mireth stood near the fire when I entered, her hands folded in front of her the same way they had been the last time. She looked thinner, as if the winter had taken more from her than she had let anyone see. For a moment neither of us spoke. "I am still angry," she said at last. "You lied to us for a long time. You let Luma care for someone who was not showing her his real face." "I know," She looked at the flames. "But Luma misses you. She asks about you every few days, though she tries not to, and I—" She stopped, then continued more quietly. "I miss the way the house felt when you were nearby. Even when I was still deciding whether I could trust you." I stepped closer, but left enough space between us that she would not feel crowded. "I do not want to be the Lord who sends charity and then disappears. I want to sit at a table with both of you. I want to hear Luma tell me what she learned at school and see you smile without having to pretend you are stronger than you feel." Mireth's eyes shone, though she did not let the tears fall. "I am afraid she will hope again, and then lose it. I have seen what that does to children." "Then I will stay long enough for that fear to grow tired," I said. "I will not leave because it becomes difficult. I will not leave because someone remembers I once kept a truth from you. If you and Luma choose to let me stay, I will be here." She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once, the smallest movement, and left without saying anything more. But she did not close the door behind her as she went. 3 weeks later, on the night before the next winter festival, Luma came to the castle. Brennan brought her to the study. She was holding a small folded card made from the same cheap paper as the first letter. Her face was serious in the way children become when they have practiced something important. "I wrote this for you," she said, and placed the card in my hand. I opened it. The handwriting was still careful, though a little steadier than before. "Thank you for helping my mother smile again. I want to change my first wish. If you want to, can you stay and be my father?" I read the words twice. The second time my vision blurred. I looked up and saw that Mireth had come in behind her daughter and was standing in the doorway watching us both. Luma waited. She did not fidget. She only looked at me with the same clear eyes that had asked for so little in the first letter. I knelt in front of her the way I had in the library. "I want that very much," I told her. Then I turned to Mireth. She hadn't moved from the doorway, but her hands were no longer clasped tightly. They hung at her sides, open. "I can only stay," I said, "if you choose it too." I reached into my coat and took out the simple silver ring I had carried since the day I decided I would not let fear decide for me again. It was plain, without jewels, because I knew she would not wear anything that looked like payment. "Mireth Oakfang," I said, "will you build a family with me?" She looked at her daughter first. Luma was crying now, quiet tears that ran down her green cheeks without sound. Then Mireth looked at me. The tiredness in her face had not disappeared, but something else had joined it, something steady and careful and real. "Yes," she said, "but not because of the first letter. Because after everything, you stayed with the truth." Luma ran forward and wrapped her arms around both of us at once. I felt the small, fierce weight of her and the steadier presence of Mireth's hand resting against my shoulder. For the first time since I could remember, the great hall behind us did not feel empty. It felt as though it had been waiting for exactly this sound, a child's uneven breathing and the quiet, steady breathing of two adults who had chosen each other after the lies had been put away. That night I walked them home through the melting snow. We did not speak much. There would be time for plans and arrangements and the careful work of learning how 3 people become one family. For now, it was enough to walk side by side under the same sky that had once carried a small letter from a child who had asked for almost nothing and received in the end far more than she had dared to name. The first letter had found me when I believed I needed nothing and no one. It had broken open a silence I had built around myself for years. But it was not the letter that made us a family. It was the choice to remain after the truth had been spoken, the choice to keep showing up even when trust had to be rebuilt from the beginning, and the choice Luma and Mireth made to let me stay. I had once thought my wealth and my title were the only things I had to offer. I had been wrong. What I had to offer was the willingness to be seen completely, the Lord and the man who had once sat alone by a dying fire holding a child's letter and wondering if his life could still be changed by something as small as a few crooked lines on cheap paper. They had changed it. And I would spend whatever years remained proving that their choice had not been a mistake.